Long before the dinosaurs and even the crocodiles roamed the earth, there was a unique group of animals that were not only extremely diverse, but also included some of the world's top predators, the therapsids. In this episode, we'll be taking a closer look at a therapsid that is also one of the newest displays at the Tate Geological Museum. On this episode of Tate Minis, allow us to introduce you to Clelandina rubigii, named after Professors John Cleland and Bruce Rubige. Don't let its appearance fool you though, because this animal was not a dinosaur, and it lived nearly 25 million years before the first dinosaur even appeared. For reference, that's about the same period of time as when Megalodon first appeared, and today. So if Clelandina isn't a dinosaur, then what is it? Clelandina belongs to a group of synapsids called gorgonopsids. For a closer look at therapsid skulls, here's Russell Hawley.
Hello, I'm Russell Hawley from the Tate Geological Museum, and I'm going to talk to you a bit about therapsids. Now, in order to understand therapsids, it's a good idea to look at how they fit into the overall classification scheme. Animals that have 4 legs are called tetrapods. Now, some tetrapods lay their eggs in the water. Frogs and salamanders would be a good example of that. But other tetrapods do not lay their eggs in the water, and those are called amniotes. Now, the first amniotes in the fossil record appear during the Pennsylvanian period. And pretty quickly on, very early on in the game, they diverge into 2 major groups, the diapsids and the synapsids. Now, the diapsids include the ancestors of snakes and lizards. Later on, they would give rise to dinosaurs and ultimately birds by way of the dinosaurs. This is an example of one. This is the skull of an alligator. And we can see the trademark features. Behind the eye sockets are a pair of holes low in the side of the skull. Those are called the temporal fenestrae. And a diapsid has another pair of holes on the top of the skull, above the temporal fenestrae, called the supratemporal fenestrae. The other major group of amniotes took a different route. One of the most recognizable of the early amniotes is Dimetrodon. Now, when people think of Dimetrodon, the first thing they think of usually is this fin or sail on its back. But what concerns us here is the structure of the animal's skull. So here is the Dimetrodon skull, nostril opening. There's the eye socket. And then behind the eye socket, 1 pair of temporal openings. So that is the synapsid trademark. And you can find that in the early synapsids and their descendants as well. Dimetrodon and his relatives lived at the beginning of the Permian period. Now, by the end of the Permian period, they had been replaced by another group of synapsids called the therapsids. And the largest predators among that group at that time were the gorgonopsians, of which Clelandina here is an example.
These were masterful hunters that had adapted to effortlessly track down and kill their prey. For instance, they had a tall, shock-absorbing skull with powerful jaw muscles that could allow them to open their mouths almost 90 degrees wide. Inside these deadly jaws were enormous incisor teeth and sharp canines. Interestingly, by the end of the Permian, gorgonopsids had reduced the size of their teeth past the incisors to the point where Clelandina had no teeth in the back of their mouths. This means that gorgonopsids were using their sharp teeth almost exclusively to remove flesh from bone. In addition to a monstrous bite, gorgonopsids had excellent binocular vision, a sort of third eye for detecting sunlight called the pineal eye, and a very keen sense of smell.
We see many of the trends in the earlier synapsids carried to an even greater extreme here. The temporal fenestrae are still there, but they're even larger, which would have made room for very large and powerful biting muscles. This Clelandina specimen is missing all but one of its teeth, and the skull has been badly squashed by depositional processes. I mean, look at this. Looks like somebody dropped an anvil on his head. But it's still an extremely important specimen because only 4 Clelandina skulls have ever been found. Now, a problem with having saber teeth is that if you get into a fight with a member of your own species over mates or territory or something, you can easily slash your opponent to ribbons while he's doing the exact same thing to you. Now, In the modern world, when animals have lethal biting weapons, they'll sometimes take on a ritualized form of combat. Rattlesnakes, for example, fighting each other, will keep their mouths shut and neck wrestle with one another. Did these guys do something the same? Well, it's entirely possible. If you look at the orbits, you'll notice that around the eye socket there are large roughened areas of bone, and this might have supported massive bony bosses in life. So when two Clelandina were fighting, they might have kept their mouths shut and turned a potentially lethal bite fest into a shoving contest of pure strength.
As uniquely well adapted as Gorgonopsids were, things would not turn out so well for Clelandina and its kin. At the end of the Permian, the world faced the most devastating mass extinction in history.
As if to add insult to injury, an enormous amount of volcanic activity kicked up in what would later become Siberia.
The Permian-Triassic mass extinction, or the Great Dying, was the largest mass extinction event in Earth's history, wiping out nearly 90% of all life on Earth. Several factors were at play during this event, as with any mass extinction, but one of the largest contributors were what's known as the Siberian Traps, an area of volcanoes in Eurasia spanning 3 million square miles that all exploded around the same time. For reference, that's as big as the entire surface area of Australia, cloaking the Earth in a thick layer of planet-darkening ash clouds for thousands of years. After the Permian, the entire family of Gorgonopsids would go extinct, but fortunately, some other therapsids managed to survive into the Mesozoic era. Long before the age of dinosaurs, life on Earth was unique and bizarre, and Clelandina was no exception to this. A strange, menacing predator from a time in Earth's history where experimentation was the name of the game that left behind a very interesting and unique fossil. We hope you've enjoyed this mini look at Clelandina rubigii. For more information about our fossils and casts, be sure to scan the next code on your Tate Mini's guide sheet to lead you to our next video. See you next time on Tate Minis.